So, okay, let me just take a different tack now. That's the general way, just a general idea of how things exist and how ignorance in our mind doesn't understand that. That's the root delusion. It doesn't understand this. So we keep clinging to everything as having an intrinsic nature. So where does this word emptiness fit in? Because we get very confused with that word. Well, emptiness is just a shorthand for the wisdom in the mind that gets to realize that there is no intrinsic cup there, chocolate cake, I, or anything else. There's not coming from there. So what we have to realize is the absence of that intrinsic I here. We have to realize the lack of the intrinsic A there. So shorthand for that is emptiness of intrinsic A, emptiness of independent A, emptiness of delicious cake, emptiness of intrinsic me. So the word emptiness. So it's a simple word. It just means not. So, if you say, we might go, oh, my cup's empty, wouldn't we? Isn't it? So this is a whole important point. If you go into the crockery section of your shopping centre, what do they call it? When do you go to your shopping? What do you call a shop where you buy your crockery? What's it called? What do you call them? What? Crockery, cups and plates, dishes. Anyway, whatever the shop is, you don't go to the shop and you don't look at all the cups and go, oh my God, they're empty. Why wouldn't you say that? Why wouldn't you say it's empty? The cups are empty. There's no tea in the cups, is there? Why wouldn't you say, oh my gosh, the cup's empty? Of tea. Why wouldn't you say that? That's right. In other words, you don't expect tea to be in a cup. You don't expect there to be tea in the cup in the crockery shop. It's clear, isn't it? So the only reason I'd say, oh my God, my cup's empty, I get a shock. Why? Because I expected tea. This is a really important point now. Okay, so we use the ordinary word empty of tea. That's pretty simple. Look in your bank, you think there are some francs there. You go, oh my God, my bank account's empty. Well, we know it means of francs, right? Because you expected francs. If you know already there's 0 francs, you don't get surprised if you don't say my bank account's empty because you know already there's no francs there. So the only reason we say, oh my God, my bank account's empty, or my cup's empty of tea is because you expected it. This is a really important point. You with me? It's logical, isn't it? Okay, good. Now, so I'm trying to first use the word empty in the very simple sense of the meaning there's not something there that you expected to be there. That's the point. You look in the room, you're looking for Mary. Oh no, the room's empty. You mean there's no people in it? We'd say that. The only reason you'd say that is if you're expecting Mary to be there. So, okay, now, like we said before, the way the mind functions, its job is to cognize. So what is its job? To cognize something. So whatever the mind cognizes, you can say it like this. They call it a phenomenon or an object or an existent. But I like to say it this way, that the mind always cognizes nouns sort of thing. So think of this. If I see my cup and there's tea in there, then the object that exists in my cup is called tea, isn't it? But if there is no tea there, turn that around into a phenomenon, and you'd call it the absence of tea. Can you hear that? It's a negating phrase. But it's a very valid statement. I'm cognizing the absence of tea in my cup. We don't talk that way, but can you hear the point? The mind cognizes like that. It always cognizes something. It cognizes something. So if you see tea in your cup, your mind just cognized the phenomenon called tea. You agree with that? In your cup. But if there's no tea there, we'd say, oh, there's no tea in my cup. Another way of putting it is as a noun, if you like, you just cognized the phenomenon called the absence of tea. Can you hear that point? And it's not just being clever. This is how the mind works. So that's called, another word for absence is emptiness. Don't hear it as like cosmic Buddhist emptiness. Emptiness simply means the absence of something. You understand what I'm saying? The ordinary meaning of the word is the absence of something. So what your mind just cognized correctly is the absence of tea in your cup. If you look in your bank, what you just cognized was the absence of francs in your bank. You with me? So the absence of something is a very vivid, real thing. Let's say you've been convinced you've got cancer. And you go to the doctor and they say you've no longer got cancer. That's a very amazing realization to have. You just discovered the absence of cancer. That's a very nice emptiness to discover, isn't it? Do you understand what I'm saying? So you discover, I don't have cancer. The mind just cognized the absence of cancer. That's the way they use the concept, the absence of something. And it's got very powerful meaning. Okay, so what's the concept? What's the Buddha's point? He is saying that this ego grasping, this marikpa, this ignorance, has been since beginningless time believing in a real intrinsic independent I. Speak just simply, okay? We believe it's there. Everything we say is on the basis of that belief. Everything we feel is on the basis of that belief. And all he's telling us is that particular I, an independent I, has never, doesn't and could never exist. So tea could exist. Money could exist. Do you understand? People could exist. They're simple examples of absences. But this is a very dramatic, radical absence. So when you realize emptiness at the subtlest level of your mind in deepest meditation on the basis of calm abiding, you can't do it conceptually. We understand it conceptually, but the realization of it has to be in single point of concentration, like Lama said. When the first time you see nakedly at a subtle level that there never has been, isn't and never could be that particular independent I. It's an impossibility. That's when you realize the emptiness of independent I. And that's the first second that you're climbing out of samsara into nirvana, and you can't fall back from there. You can only go forward because you've cut the root. You've got more work to do, but that's the first time you realize it beyond conceptual. It's beyond conceptual. It's at the subtle level of your mind. And you realize that absence. You see that, this incredible realization that there hasn't been, isn't, and never could be that I you've believed in since beginningless time. Are we communicating here? Just the use of the words, Yeah. Yeah. Go on. Things, the world, yes, that's right.
But then, what is this that identifies with our attachment?
Sorry, what?
What is it?
What do you mean? I don't understand. Say it another way.
We identify, the I we make up identifies with our the feelings or the attachment.
I don't understand that. Say it another way. Okay, so we've got...
So who is it then?
Okay, so Sasha does. It's easy. You're Sasha, right? Who are you? Oh, who's Sasha? Oh, him. Okay. So you're Thomas. So, okay, this is where it's not tricky. It's just got to think carefully. We've got to think carefully. There is no intrinsic Thomas. We can't understand what that means. We can't point out a separate Thomas. But at the same time, conventionally, Thomas is a valid name for this piece of property over there. No, wait a minute. You got to just not leap ahead. Conventionally, there is a Thomas sitting on that cushion, but ultimately that we can't find. This is where we have to get the two things together. Conventionally, there is a Thomas there. So the Thomas is the label we give to this body and this mind. So Thomas is who feels attachment. Thomas is who makes up the stories, but not an intrinsic Thomas. That's the part that we have to get, and that's what takes time. You have to think. I mean, it just takes thinking because there's concepts we're not used to thinking. That's all. And of course, they've got logic to it, but it just takes time to put them all together, that's all. So, in other words, saying, and it's a bit Tony's point the same, when we hear there is no Tony from his own side, or no Thomas, we immediately hear there's no Thomas, period. You just threw the baby out with the bathwater. That's a great saying in English. I don't know if you have it in German. It's a really brilliant saying. We over-exaggerated. We said, we assume when we say there is no intrinsic Tony, intrinsic Thomas, we're thinking it's saying there is no Thomas. That's too extreme. So the two truths, ultimately, you cannot find there an A on those lines. A is projected by the mind. But there is an A that you do use when you spell the word cat. You put the A in there and it functions to help you understand the word cat. So it's really tricky. As Lama Zopa says, when you realize emptiness of A, it's as if there's no A. But there is an A, conventionally, that functions exactly as it should. There is no Thomas from the side of those aggregates, from the side of that thing there. You cannot find an ultimate Thomas. But there is a Thomas that bears the label that functions as Thomas, that was the son of that mother and goes and born and dies and creates karma. And it's putting these seemingly contradictory two truths together that's the secret to success. And as Lama Zopa says, when we realize emptiness of Thomas, it's as if there's no Thomas, but there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if he doesn't exist. And that's very tasty. That's from the yogi's experience. So it just needs lots of hard work and lots of logic and analysis and much meditating to put these things together. Well, I'm very happy for you. So, but I don't think you do, because you said it all wrong. So you don't integration. You said the wrong words. If you said the right words, I'd agree with you, but you didn't say the right words.
But for me, this person Thomas comes up like when I'm very angry or.
That's when you just notice.
Emotions because I identify with this emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where I feel this ego. And
Well,
I understand this is not the Thomas, but then what?
But that's a different discussion. We're not discussing that. You're discussing, like your first question was, who is it who is experiencing the anger? That's Thomas is experiencing the anger, but you're giving it an intrinsic status to Thomas, and you're giving an intrinsic status to the anger. So it's a subtler point that I'm making here. Of course, so a very good practical day-to-day practice is excellent, what you're just saying, but it's not the subtle one. That is to say, the anger is there. But like I said before, because we feel it so powerfully and we over-exaggerate its status and we feel it's who I am. That's another discussion, and that's coming to emptiness, but it's not the point I'm making. But it's a very excellent practice. When we do realize there is anger, there is love, there is compassion, there is these things, and we realize the delusions are adventitious and we can get rid of them and they're not the real me. That's another practice, but it leads us to emptiness, but it's not the emptiness one. But it's very helpful. Hang on a second. Sasha. Yes. Yeah.
So that means that my mind makes up after it moves that it's I. So the movement happens by itself, right?
I'm lost completely. I don't understand that point.
Let's say I'm walking on the street.
Yeah.
There's a thought thinking I'm walking.
Oh, yes, exactly. There's a thought, I am walking on the street. So, okay, exactly, a good example. So, ultimately, you see, so the mind. So let's say someone else walking. You see a person, you see them walking, so what your mind does is exactly the same with the A. You see the body and you see a body walk, making movements of putting one foot in front of the other. That's what you see. It's just a movement, but you label it, he is walking. And then ignorance causes you to believe that it's an inherent walking. It's coming from its own side, but you labeled it walking. If you've never heard of walking before, just like if you've never seen an A before, you wouldn't know that's called walking. It's only when you're called, that's called walking, Sasha, your mummy tells you, you then impute walking on it, but you forget that you labelled it that. And as one Lama said, we're like children who draw a lion and then become afraid of it. We forgot that we created it. That's samsara. But it's also quick. It happens in a millionth of a second, you know. First you see the lines, then you call it A, and then you believe in it. All that now then happens from then on. All these things come together, and you see there's A. And you think it comes from the A on the board. It doesn't. It comes from your mind calling it that. Because if you didn't ever know those three lines were A, you'd never see A for a million years. Yes? No, that's not the point at all. That's not the point at all. That's because of habit. If you see a person playing piano beautifully, you know it just doesn't happen by itself. It's the result of years of practice. Would you agree? Well, that's why you walk, because it's practice. You just practiced. And that's where if you get a stroke, you've got to start practicing again. But everything's habit. That's why anger rises automatically, because it's habit. It's only because it's habit. That's all. Walking, talking, doing everything is because it's eons and eons of habit. That's why these sort of some group of monkeys or apes, I forget which kind, they come out of their mummy's womb and they turn around and they have sex with their mummy and their daddy and their auntie and their uncle and their sister and their enemies, because they've got a very strong habit to have sex. It's just everything's habit. And that's karma. Everything we do is habit. Everything is habit. Programming from countless lifetimes. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just that. Are you hearing me? Okay, good. That's a good start. Who back there? What's your question, honey? What's your question? Sorry, what?
about reincarnation.
Yes.
How is, like, if everything is impermanent,
Well, we're discussing what impermanence is grosser than emptiness, but never mind. If everything is impermanent, yeah. Go on.
like, that's the universal law.
Well, that's one of the universal laws. It's not it's not the subtlest one. Emptiness is the subtlest one.
All right.
So what's the question?
So, if this is one of the universal laws,
Yes, it is.
everything is changing,
Exactly. That's right.
including the sense of self.
Everything. That's right.
So, how can reincarnation exist?
Oh, okay, so there's a misunderstanding there in our view of what impermanence means. Because in Buddhism, it's got two distinct meanings. One is the grosser level of impermanence is that a cushion, you make the cushion, the pieces come together, and it disintegrates and it finishes. A tree grows and it dies. You get born and you die. That's gross impermanence, which is fairly evident, right? But the subtle impermanence is that things are changing moment by moment. So you can have a phenomenon like the mind that for the Buddha doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end, but it exists moment by moment in changingness. So that's a subtler impermanence. Impermanence doesn't imply that it just disappears. Something can exist for eternity and be impermanent in its nature. Do you understand? So your consciousness just think of it as a river of mental moments. So that's what it reincarnates, but it's changing moment by moment. That's subtle impermanence. Do you understand? Okay, good. Yes, Tony.
For me, the mind appears to be physical because, it moves, changes.
Why does that assume physical?
Well, okay, let me just finish first. And then when you attain nirvana, it ceases to exist.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, that's very fascinating. Oh, okay, I understand. Well, first of all, I have no idea about the physical. That's not Buddha's view. And secondly, there's different views in Buddhism about what happens when you've achieved nirvana. So from the point of view in Buddhism of the Hinayana teachings, the teachings that you hear in Thailand and Burma, their interpretation of this view is that when you've realized emptiness and you've cut all the delusions, then when you die, you've disappeared. But the Mahayana does not have that view at all. Your mind is endless and beginningless, and it's not in its nature physical. Absolutely not one atom of physicality. You heard me reading. All I can do is quote the teachings. I'm not trying to say I'm so clever and I know it. All I can do is speak authentically of the teachings I've heard from my teachers on the Mahayana Buddhist point of view. And like I read in the book of Lama Yeshe, mind is not physical. It's beginningless, it's endless, it doesn't have a creator, it is not in its nature physical. But it's conjoined inextricably with the set of the... So they say, this is coming from the Hindus, talking in the Vajrayana model, we've got gross consciousness and gross body, these two here, inextricably linked. Eye consciousness is not the eyeball. Eye consciousness depends upon the eyeball to work to have a cognition of colour and shape. So then the subtle level of consciousness is, and this is how they talk in the Hindus as well, is inextricably linked with a subtle level of physicality, the prana, the wind energies, the subtle channels, the shushuma, all the subtle nervous system, and the kundalini energy. That's subtle physical energy. Not an object of the eye, but that's physical energy, and it's conjoined with subtle consciousness. And that's not, they're separate but together. You can't have them separate, but they are separate phenomena. And then you've got very subtle consciousness, inextricably linked with the very subtle wind energy. These are just the nature of the universe. And so as the Buddhists would say in the Vajrayana, which is the same as the Hindus, that all minds, which are not physical, are linked inextricably with their own set of the four elements. So maybe that's what you're discussing. Your mind. Your mind, by removing the delusions from it. No, it doesn't. Even after attaining enlightenment. Then by the time if you've achieved nirvana, you become this blissful radiant being who's existing in bliss. But if you're on the Mahayana path, you come back born again and again and again, and as a bodhisattva, manifesting in countless bodies to help sentient beings until you become a Buddha, and now you manifest in the universe to help others as long as time exists. You never stop manifesting in billions of bodies and billions of universes to help. As long as there are suffering sentient beings, baby, they're your job. Do you understand? Okay.
So the incarnations
Never stop, and it's effortless by then. You can do what you like, honey. You can manifest as universes, as dogs, as cats, as buildings. You can do what you like. You're in charge now. What else, people? Yeah. Self, yes. The independent self. The independent I doesn't exist. That's right. Yeah. That's right, precisely. Precisely, exactly the same. Yes. I know, it's curious. I know this is very interesting because in the teachings they say that we first have to realize the emptiness of the I and then we can realize the emptiness of external phenomena. But it does seem easier, doesn't it? I know. I mean, always think of a prison, for example. So, if I defined a prison, I'd say it's an ugly place where you're sent when you're naughty that you can't escape from. Well, certainly in America anyway. I mean, the further north you go in Europe, the nicer prisons are. I've got this guy from Norway who was emailing me saying he's really looking forward to going to prison next. In 6 months' time, he had a 2-year prison sentence. He's looking forward to it because he can study and really do good things while he's, it's like, wow. That's fantastic for him. But in America, you don't want to go to prison, I promise. So the point this is my point, about that woman. She was able to literally relabel it. Now, the point about labeling, this is very fascinating. If we hear there's no prison from its own side, then we think, well, we can call anything anything. It sounds like nihilism. You can do what you like. But no, the first thing you've got to do is define something. So if we define a prison, a knife. A knife is a long piece of metal that you can cut something with. That's a good definition. So it's got 2 parts. A definition has 2 parts usually. The first part tells you its conventional characteristics. It's a piece of metal with a sharp edge. But then you've got to say, well, what does it do? It cuts things. That's a good definition. Now, so then we think, well, there's no intrinsic knife. Then we can call it anything we like. No, it has to function in the way you defined it. So if you say, you can say this is a knife, it could function to cut a soft thing, couldn't it? So you could argue for that moment you could label it a knife because it does function to cut something. But you can't just make up and say anything. It's got to function. So the way they say it is, ultimately, there is no cup from its own side, but conventionally, it functions to hold my tea. And this is putting together the 2 truths. So it can never go sailing off into nihilism, It's really grounds. This is the key thing of that Tsongkhapa praises Buddha for his teachings on the 2 truths, on dependent arising and emptiness. He put these 2 together. You can never just go on into nihilism and say there is nothing from its own side. But when we understand, like that woman seemed to, there's no intrinsic prison. So, I mean, many people I know in prison go mad because it is ugly. They are sent there. They might be naughty, but even worse if they're not naughty and they've been wrongly blamed, people go crazy because they really believe, because it's prison, you've got to suffer. Whereas that woman could see, they couldn't take my mind from me. So she called it something different. She said, I decided I'm not a prisoner. I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell. I'm in a cave. But it fits the definition. She was able to sit there and meditate and do yoga. So that's a valid statement. And that's emptiness. And when we can do this, we're liberated. Do you understand? I mean, this is where even talking yesterday, Nina was saying, oh, I'm tired. I'm saying I'm tired, So therefore we assume we have to be miserable. Well, your body's not your mind. You can be tired, your body can be aching, and you have a happy mind. But it's a revelation to us. But we just assume so many things because we're so caught up in rubbish, I'm in prison, I've got to be miserable. I've got a bad knee, I've got to be unhappy. No, you don't. You can label it differently. And that's the more advanced level. They call it transforming problems into happiness. And that's based on understanding emptiness. It's incredible. It's so powerful. And that is really when we can be liberated. Right now we're paralyzed by believing I've got to have nice things and no pain, then I can be happy. But when we really understand emptiness, we can call any damn thing we like, And it's really powerful practice, calling your suffering something good because you're finishing up the karma. And be happy about it. Like that woman in prison. Amazing. What else, you people? Yes. Emptiness. Yeah. Yeah. That's where high school, where we learn Buddhist psychology, we learn about what a delusion is, we learn what a virtue is, we learn what the 3rd category, we learn the way the mind works. That's there before you even get to emptiness. That's why that is so absolutely. And learning this whole way, the mechanics of how we function. Absolutely. That's exactly right. And start with attachment and aversion, because they're also just projections. And then that prepares us to go to the subtle level of understanding emptiness. Absolutely. That's what is so unique. That's Buddha's view is so precise, so particular, you know. It comes from these Indians. If you've studied the Hindus, it comes from them. These genius Indians were the ones. But then Buddha diverged in his own direction, you know. But that's exactly right. Learning to understand how the mind labels things, angry, beautiful, ugly, this, that, and how that comes from our mind. That's right. And that leads us to really understand the deeper level. Absolutely. But that implies we have to learn to recognize in our mind what's going on. And that's the tough one. Because we don't notice until this becomes a full-blown emotion. And it's way too late by then, you know. And that means we have to understand, like we were talking before you came in, wasn't it, or not? I forget. How our feelings, our emotions, is when our body's involved, is just the tip of the iceberg. It's way too late to notice you're angry when you're about to kill somebody. You've got to notice the conceptual stories that inform that emotion that have been raging on underneath as strong practice, you know, beforehand. That's the real work in learning to know your own mind. Be your own therapist, as Lama Yeshe puts it. Then we're ready to realize emptiness. Absolutely. Can't just leap into it, you know. Got to prepare ourselves. Absolutely. Yes. No, nothing. Absolutely, utterly and completely nothing. And again, in all the Hindu views and the many Buddhist views, there are many arguments, debates about all this. But the view that we're describing here, the only one I can speak about, is the view that's the Prasangika Madhyamika view, the middle way view of this particular school of thought, which is said to be the real meaning of what Buddha says. Everything that does exist has to be empty of intrinsic existence. Because, in fact, emptiness of intrinsic existence is what causes things to exist in the first place. There can't be anything. In other words, speaking is real simple. The implication of not empty means it doesn't depend on something. Even the most simple way we understand the universe, everything exists in dependence upon something. We say in English, you don't exist as an island. You don't exist in isolation. That's the meaning of emptiness. Nothing can exist on its own without depending on something. So the Buddha would say nothing can exist without depending on causes, nothing can exist without depending on parts, and nothing can exist without the mind calling it that. And they're the levels of it, you know. Everything necessarily is empty of intrinsic existence, and that's how come things exist. Nothing could exist without that. That's the point. Yes. Because they're different human beings with different understandings. This is how it is. You could argue that. You could say that, yeah. But maybe not. Maybe it's like this. Yes. That's right. Oh, because we're different. It's an easy answer. It's an easy answer. It's an easy answer. When you're 2, if your mother teaches you like a 5-year-old, you're lost. If you're 7 and she teaches you like a 16-year-old, so you've got to know the person's mind and know what's right for that person's mind. I mean, that's the answer. But that's the answer. Buddha taught different things for different people. They're Buddha's teachings. That's the answer. Not everyone's got the same level. We know that, surely. So Buddha taught different things for different people. And there can indeed be wrong views, yes. But they even say when you're going through these views, when you study Buddhist philosophy, you study Buddhist tenets, and you learn all these different views, you know. And so they say the real way to go to the final one is to progress through the other views. You got to get rid of the other layers. You can't just leap to the right one. You've got to go through the stages. So in that sense, they're valid. They lead you. And all of these teachings are arguments that have come from real positions of real minds. And so at different stages, you only can understand certain things, which sort of makes sense. Are you satisfied with that answer? Huh? Okay.